All right, so get this picture in your head, right? It's 2025. President Trump, he's giving this big second-term speech to Congress. The one.
Oh, yeah.
And the Republicans, they're going wild, cheering like crazy. But over there, a whole section of Democrats just sitting there like statues.
Silent treatment, huh?
Totally stone-faced. Not even a smile when he brings out this 13-year-old cancer survivor. I mean, come on.
Yeah, you really got to wonder what's going on in their heads, right?
That's exactly what we're diving into today. This article we found, The Paradox of Partisanship, uses this whole bizarre scene to kind of kick off a deep dive into what's really going on with American politics.
And let me tell you, it gets intense pretty quickly.
So today we're trying to figure out, like, why did this happen? What does it tell us about just how divided we were back then and honestly still are today?
And what does it mean for all of us, trying to make sense of this crazy political world we're living in?
Right, because it's not just some weird moment in history. It's like a symptom of something way bigger.
Absolutely. The article does a great job setting the scene. March 2025, Trump's victory speech, round 2, if you will.
And the political climate. It was like a tinderbox just waiting for a spark.
Yeah. Talk about tension in the air, right?
The article talks about how Republicans were practically ecstatic, right? They saw this as a total validation of everything they'd been fighting for.
Yeah. Meanwhile, the Democrats, they'd spent years battling tooth and nail against Trump. I mean, they saw him as a legitimate threat to the country.
Which, is a whole other conversation.
Yeah.
But that's the backdrop for all of this.
And it's important to remember, too, this wasn't just about policy disagreements anymore.
Oh, absolutely not.
Trump had become a symbol, almost like this lightning rod, for all the deeper anxieties and frustrations that were brewing in the country.
Okay, so we've got this supercharged atmosphere, and then bam, this seemingly simple act of Democrats refusing to stand or clap blows up into this huge controversy.
Because it wasn't simple at all. Like the article points out, standing and clapping during a speech like this, I mean, that's not just a physical action that's loaded with meaning.
Yeah, it's a sign of respect.
Exactly. It's about agreement showing some sense of national unity. By refusing to participate, the Democrats were sending a very, very deliberate message.
And that's where it gets really interesting, right? Because on the one hand, you can totally see it as a powerful form of protest.
Sure.
They're using their silence, to show their disapproval, which, hey, that's totally valid.
But on the other hand, you can't ignore this question of decorum,
Decorum, yeah.
Is there a certain level of respect that just comes with the office of the president, no matter who's holding it?
I see what you're saying.
And is there a line that gets crossed when you refuse to even acknowledge, let alone applaud, a 13-year-old cancer survivor?
I mean, that's what really stuck with me, honestly, that detail about the cancer survivor.
It's powerful.
You'd think that's something everyone could get behind, something that goes beyond politics,
And that's exactly why the article highlights it. It shows you just how deep these partisan divisions really run. I mean, for some of those Democrats, any action, even something as small as clapping that could be seen as support for Trump, felt like a total betrayal of their values.
Wow.
It's like their opposition reached this point where they couldn't separate the person from the office, the policy from the human being.
So we're talking multiple layers here, right? The political, the symbolic, even this moral dimension.
Absolutely.
But the article doesn't just stop there. It also brings up some specific examples of how this tension actually played out.
Oh, yeah. Gets into the nitty-gritty.
Like it talks about Representative Al Green, who was literally removed from the chamber for disrupting the speech.
And then you have Sidney Combe-Lagerdove, who walked out calling the whole thing shameful.
Wow. So it wasn't just about sitting there quietly. Some people felt like they had to actively protest, make their dissent impossible to ignore.
And that brings up a really fascinating question that the article poses. What's the line between legitimate protest and, unacceptable disruption?
Ooh, good question.
When does dissent become disrespectful, even counterproductive?
Especially in a setting like this.
Right.
The halls of Congress, a speech to the nation, it all feels very sacred in a way.
And it forces us to face the fact that there's no easy answer here.
Yeah.
What one person sees as principled protest, another person might see as blatant disrespect for democratic norms.
Totally.
And our own political leanings, well, they often shape where we land on that spectrum.
Which brings us right to the heart of the article's argument, this idea that partisanship can actually warp how we see things.
Oh, it messes with your head for sure. The article gets into the psychology of it all, explaining how it basically trains us to see everything as us versus them.
Like we're constantly dividing the world into good guys and bad guys, and anyone who's not on our team is automatically suspicious.
Exactly. It talks about how partisanship can basically hijack our ability to think rationally.
It's scary how easily that can happen.
It leads us to oversimplify really complex issues and demonize people who just disagree with us.
So for some of those Democrats, any positive action towards Trump, even something as simple as applauding for a cancer survivor, might have felt like siding with the enemy.
Right, regardless of the context.
It's wild.
And that's what makes this situation so fascinating. It's not just about political disagreements, it's about the power of group identity.
Yeah.
And how that can shape how we see the world, even when it comes to something as basic as human compassion.
You know what? This is giving me a lot to think about, honestly.
Me too.
Like how I view the other side and how much my own political leanings might be clouding my judgment.
That's exactly the kind of critical thinking the article is pushing for. You know, it's not about telling us what to think.
Right.
It's about giving us the tools to examine our own biases so we can have more nuanced conversations about these complex issues.
This deep dive is turning out to be even more thought-provoking than I expected. We're going to take a quick pause here, and when we come back, we'll explore how the media further complicated this already pretty messy situation.
And, you know, you can't really talk about this whole thing without thinking about the media's role in all this.
Oh, for sure.
The article points out how the story of the seated Democrats, it just blew up, like it dominated the news for days.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
And it makes you wonder, you know, did all that focus on this one visual, this moment of, you know, partisan tension? Did it actually overshadow what Trump was even saying in his speech?
It's a really good point. Was this even like a legitimate news story, or did they just completely blow it out of proportion?
Well, the article doesn't give us a straight answer,
Right.
but it does ask some really important questions about how the media shapes our understanding of these events.
Right, like what they choose to focus on, how they spin the narrative, what gets amplified, and what gets totally ignored.
Exactly. And all of that has a huge impact on how we perceive things.
It's kind of like, you know how a photo can capture a single moment in time,
Yeah.
but it doesn't always tell the whole story. You're only seeing like a tiny piece of what actually happened.
Exactly. And that's why it's so crucial to be media literate, you know,
Media literate.
to understand how the information is presented to us, to think critically about the stories we're being told.
Because those stories have power, right?
Yeah.
They shape how we see the world.
Absolutely.
So we have this supercharged political environment, this really dramatic act of protest, and then the media comes in and potentially amplifies the whole thing. Maybe even distorts it in the process.
Talk about a recipe for chaos, right?
Total chaos.
And the article points out that the public reaction really reflected that chaos. Polls showed people were completely split on whether what the Democrats did was justified or not.
Yeah, some people were like, this is taking a stand against a president they saw as dangerous.
Right? Others felt it was totally disrespectful, even childish, you know?
It's interesting how a single event can be interpreted in such wildly different ways.
And that divide, it speaks to this larger challenge we face as a society. How do we even have meaningful conversations about these complex issues when we can't even agree on the basic facts?
Let alone interpret them the same way, right?
Yeah. Exactly. It's like we're all speaking different languages, even though we're technically using the same words.
That's a great way to put it.
The article doesn't shy away from this complexity. It ends with a call for both sides to try and find a path forward, but it also recognizes that some of these divisions, they might just be too deep to bridge.
That's what I found so interesting about the article's conclusion. It balances this hopeful message of unity with a very real dose of reality.
Right. It urges us to listen to each other, to respect different viewpoints, to really try and find common ground.
Which is so important.
But then it hits you with this really thought-provoking question. What if some of the opposition to Trump or, you know, any really polarizing figure is rooted not in disagreement, but in pure, unadulterated hatred?
That's a chilling thought. The idea that some people might be so entrenched in their beliefs, so consumed by anger and resentment, that they can't even see any good in the other side.
And it raises this question that I think each of us has to grapple with. Is there a point where dialogue becomes impossible, where the gap is just too wide to bridge?
Wow, heavy stuff.
Yeah.
But I think it's crucial that we actually wrestle with these questions, especially in the world we're living in today.
I agree. Understanding the forces that drive us apart.
Yeah.
That's the first step toward figuring out how to come back together.
This deep dive has been quite a journey so far. We started with what seemed like a simple act of protest, and we ended up exploring the darkest corners of partisan politics. Where do we even go from here? It's easy to get kind of swept up in all those big political moments, right? Those clashes of, ideology playing out on the national stage.
Oh, yeah.
But this whole thing with the Democrats sitting at it really makes you think about how much that kind of thinking, like that partisan thinking, how much it's like seeped into our everyday lives.
It's a great point. The article doesn't really talk about this directly.
Right.
But the parallels are there. We see these same dynamics happening online in our communities, even within families.
Oh, totally. I mean, how many times have we seen, friendships fall apart because of political arguments?
Right.
Or families who can't even have like a holiday dinner together without it turning into a shouting match.
It's everywhere. And it goes back to this idea the article mentions, how politics has become so intertwined with our identities.
It's not just about policies or candidates anymore. It's about who we are as people.
Right. It's about our values, our sense of belonging.
And when those values feel like they're being attacked, it can trigger a really strong emotional reaction.
Oh, absolutely. It's like we instantly go into defense mode, ready to fight anyone who questions our worldview.
So how do we break out of this cycle? How do we escape those echo chambers and start having real conversations with people who see things differently?
Well, the article kind of hints at this, and I think it starts with a shift in perspective.
A shift.
We need to recognize that most people, even the ones we totally disagree with, they're not evil. They're not malicious. They just have different experiences, different perspectives.
Different ways of seeing the world. That's a good reminder. It's so easy to get caught up in all the outrage and, just assume the worst about people on the other side.
Oh, for sure. And social media doesn't help. It just feeds us more of what we already believe, creating these echo chambers where we rarely see anything that challenges our views.
So maybe step one is to be more aware of the information we're taking in, to actually seek out different perspectives, even if they make us a little uncomfortable.
Absolutely. And when we do have those conversations with people who disagree, the focus should be on understanding their point of view, not just trying to win the argument.
It's about actually listening, not just waiting for our turn to speak.
Exactly. Active listening is key. Asking questions, putting yourself in their shoes, really trying to see things from their side.
You might not change their mind and they might not change yours.
Right.
But at least you'll walk away with a better understanding of where they're coming from.
And hey, maybe you'll find some common ground.
Right. Some shared values that can help bridge that gap.
That's the hope. It's not about getting rid of our differences. It's about finding ways to coexist and collaborate in spite of them. It's about remembering that our shared humanity is way more powerful than our political differences.
Well said. So I think as we wrap up this deep dive, the main takeaway is this partisanship. It's a powerful force.
No doubt.
It can really distort how we see things and make it hard to have, productive conversations.
Definitely.
But it's not impossible to overcome. By recognizing our own biases, seeking out different perspectives, and engaging in, respectful dialogue, we can start to bridge that divide and build a more united and understanding society.
Couldn't have said it better myself. It's a challenge, no question, but it's a challenge worth taking on, because the alternative, a world where we're all just stuck in our own little bubbles, unable to talk to anyone who sees things differently.
That's not a world I want to live in.
Me neither.
So on that note, we'll leave you with this thought. How can you apply these insights to your own life?
Good question.
What steps can you take to break free from your own echo chamber and have more meaningful conversations across the political divide? The answer, like always, it's within you. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Keep those conversations going, and we'll catch you next time.
In the heart of this nation, under skies so blue, there's a spirit that's stirring values strong and true. From the mountains to the prairies, from the cities to the sea, we stand for liberty, for faith and family.